Hello everybody and welcome to an exciting further episode of the Super Suckhour starring yours truly, the Super Sucklord. We're here with Mr. Larz, Sidekick of Sidekick Labs, and once again returning to the show, the very opinionated and very intelligent creative David fucking Healey. Hello! If you're looking around, you might notice that we are not in the Psychedelic Studio today. In fact, we are doing first in what's going to be an ongoing series of specialized episodes that I'm calling the Travel Series.
On the road.
On the road. Occasionally, I do get my ass out of fucking New York City, and I do go to other places and do other things, and I need to keep this fucking show on the road. So I brought all the cameras with me up to Rutland fucking Vermont, because we are actually broadcasting today from the infamous Sidekick Laboratories. Whoa,
yeah. We are.
This is the place where Mr. Larz has set up all his anachronistic art manufacturing machines to make the trading cards and the blisters and the weird boxes that David Healey uses and all these other art packaging artifact things that a lot of people in our business use. And we came up here to get the fuck out of hot-ass New York City to work on some of our projects.
That's what we did. And it's not as hot-ass up here as it is in New York City.
It is still somewhat miserable up here, but considerably less so. So thank you for having us in your facility.
Glad to have you here.
We recently got a piece of fan mail directed at you specifically.
Yeah, I got fan mail.
How did that feel?
Actually, it felt a little bit half weird and half kind of cool.
What was weird about it?
That I'm not worthy of any kind of fan mail.
You really believe that?
Partly, yeah. You know, it's like I'm always struggling to be accepted. So when somebody
in
seems...
your own mind, because everyone else has already accepted you.
Yes.
So it's a total hallucination. So, but you did get some fan mail, which I think ran counter to your inner narrative that you don't.
That's correct. That's what made me feel weird. This is contradictory to what I believe.
I know, but it's not contradictory to what you desire. So you may
that's
as well
true.
go with that. But yeah, I mean, you were on 2 episodes of this show recently, and we got into a lot of the sort of nerdy process talk, which, you know, sometimes I worry are people going to get alienated by the lack of anal sex talk, and other people love it and ask for more. So you're about to get a lot of it today.
What did the fan mail say?
Basically that he appreciated the talking about the nitty-gritty of manufacturing and the process, and that he wanted to hear more of it. So here we are.
Is this somebody that we know or someone that came out of the blue?
Someone that came out of the blue. I saw the fan mail. It was beautiful fan mail. Didn't know who the guy was, so that's great. I always like it when it's someone outside of the circle.
Well, it's rare when you get something that's more than just a sentence. This was a whole paragraph. That was really nice.
Well, it was some guy that wanted to do what you were doing, and you're a little further down the road than him, and he admired that. So
yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for the fan mail.
Yeah, okay. Don't let it go to your head. One of the things, where the fuck is Rutland Vermont anyway?
Okay, it's about a third of the way from the south towards the north of Vermont. So about a third of the way up the state of Vermont and against the New York side. So we're maybe about 4 hours from New York City.
Yeah, it's 5 hours on the train. The Amtrak, it's so out here.
The Ethan Allen Express.
Yeah, it comes once a day. It comes at night and leaves in the morning.
It's a milk train.
Yeah, so here we are, out here in the middle of nowhere in this kind of, what sort of town is this? I mean, it doesn't seem like much is going on here.
No, it's kind of quiet nowadays. It was a quarrying and rock. You know, all the Dorset Quarry, the Rutland quarries, like the
rock business.
The library in New York City, the 42nd Street. All the facade of that was mined near here.
Are you fucking serious? See, we took what we wanted from you, and then that.
That's it.
But
now, an aside on that was originally a reservoir, right? That they had the foundation for, and it was filled with water, and then they turned it into the library. Am I correct by saying that?
No,
absolutely.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So when they decided to put a facade on it, they came to Rutland.
That's correct.
Nice.
Well, now Rutland's claim to fame is that it's the home of Sidekick Labs, where really, really important artwork is getting made by seriously
we make facades for amazing acts of...
We make facades for our persona.
So what did you come up here for? What were you working on?
Well, I came up here to get the hell away from the city and drink some Granny Blossom's Bloody Mary mix micheladas, because you can't get this homemade Bloody Mary shit in New York, but you can get it here in Rutland, Vermont. So I came basically up here to drink, play with Lego, and do a little vacuum forming.
Cool.
We've been making some blisters on your giant vacuum forming
I hope that's okay.
What, this?
Yeah.
Why? What's wrong with it?
When it went pop.
Oh no, it's fine.
Okay.
It's not a little extra tingly.
Yeah,
fermented.
I mean, I came up here to.
It's hard mix.
Ooh, someone put lemon in it already.
I mean, I mostly came up here to use your vacuum forming machine.
Yeah.
Every swallow of that, you will have one horrible, horrendous.
Well, which we made a breakthrough on, which was. You want to talk about the big blisters?
People want to know about this shit, so sure,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, we had done a while back where you needed a big ass blister that was about 16 inches long by 4 by 5 inches.
Yeah, for the salami. I mean, it's a blister card of a salami.
As opposed to a big ass blister. Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
And so we created a hydrocal master buck for this thing, but we had problems with the webs in the corners. Trying to do a draw and get a deep draw down. Actually, we should have brought a couple of props.
I shot a bunch of B-roll.
Okay. And what we discovered today, working both of us collaborating on it, is that we created a little pseudo extra raised area outside of the blister, which then fixed the webbing in the corner. It's hard to describe without having props, but that was really, thank you for being up here and, goading me along to try how to get rid of the webs,
Well, what's funny about the stuff that we do up here is that we are kind of making up a lot of stuff as we go. We're trying to make giant blister cards, and basically it's made by heating up this clear sheet of plastic and then dropping it down on a positive form with suction underneath, and it sucks the thing over the forming thing. And we're getting all kinds of weird folds and bends and little, excess plastic just sort of not going anywhere. And we ran probably like $100 worth of material through the machine trying to figure out how to get rid of it. He's fiddling with the temperature, he's changing the suction, the fucking time, everything. We're still getting the problem. And then somehow you pulled out of your ass this notion to put these extra rails around it to create a secondary reservoir to sort of pull in the extra, or just keep
to stretch it properly.
Yeah, or force it to go down further, because otherwise it was just sort of tenting out. But then by having this little lip, it pulled it back in, and that's what we do. But it's like, that's what's interesting about this shit. It's like we're doing stuff we've never done before, and you have this machine, and you being the egghead that you are, that's why I keep you around, just suddenly had this idea. I never would have fucking thought of that. I was ready to just say, oh, well, it's a Suckadelic product. It doesn't matter.
Live with the webs.
Suck. Yeah, but no, not you. Hey, hand me those paper towels there, would you?
Aye.
So I appreciate that. I mean, it's like there's something about coming up to this place where there's no women. I don't have to take a shower. And there's nothing to do up here except work on our craft. And that's when you get some of the best breakthroughs ever, is when you have nowhere else to go.
Well, what I love when you come up here is that we actually start creating something exceptional and wonderful with this old machinery that I would never have thought of doing. The challenges that you bring actually create something that is larger, newer, more interesting than what I would conceive of by myself.
Yeah, I guess potentially, and also because I'm a world famous, successful artist, I have this huge platform in which to show off all these incredible projects. Just like you, David. Why are you up here? What are you doing here this week?
I'm pursuing things that are impossible for me to do by myself, and that I need someone to work with, like Tom, in order to collaborate and make stuff. Like packaging, it's all here. It's all because of this. I had black paper and a rubber stamp. Tom got me into, foiling.
Foil.
And it's just been really getting cooler black paper and doing more stuff with hot foiling, but it's been a nice thing to build with,
Yeah, I saw you were doing some pretty creative stuff.
Yeah.
Some pretty slick little boxes.
Cool
for
stuff.
Your little figures.
Yeah. The packaging here creates an environment outside of the figure that I think feels exactly like the figure.
Well, let's
I
talk about
appreciate
packaging
that.
a little bit,
Mhm.
which is, in my mind, it provides a context for the piece. So you have this piece, but it has its own allure and charm and detail, and it's a fascinating object by itself. But in terms of presenting it as a new figure to the public, it has no context in this state. It does not have a name. It does not have a purpose. It doesn't have a
Place.
place. And so, like with your carded figures, you're providing a lot of context material.
Yeah, it's more important than the toy itself.
And so the package becomes the context to understand the figure through.
Yeah, but then
I think packaging also just suggests something is new. It's like to really break it down. It's like it's something that hasn't been opened, and I think that's just like a really interesting
an untouched
concept.
figure.
Yeah, and like with
his packages don't create any context at all. They're black with his name on it.
Yeah, but the thing is,
them.
they give allusions to nostalgic things and things that are.
Yeah, but you're almost creating an anti-context in a way.
Yeah,
like
but
you're
it's
going out of your way to not suggest anything about the toy.
But it's still very suggestive.
Well,
it's a suggestive of a feeling.
It's a much more ambiguous feeling.
Yeah. And my thing is, like, I just want my stuff to pop, so I just put it on black. And if I'm not going to print neon, because usually printed neon is brighter than resin neon. So it's just going to get your eye more.
You don't like when your package takes over your figure.
No, if you want to make your figure look good, I feel make your thing black. That's why I've always done it.
Right,
it just makes the colors.
You don't want people to notice how shitty your figure is. Make the package really awesome.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, that's what I say.
Pink,
That's been my philosophy.
Yeah.
But we're getting big ideas out here all the time.
Yeah, the packaging's a feeling here. The stuff that I make here with Tom, it has a certain feel. Now it has
literally a feeling.
Yeah, it has a tactile feeling.
But now you're just great because you use the same package for everything or variations.
Same concept. Yeah. But it's still equally as challenging though, because every time I'm gonna move ahead and I need a new package, I know it has to be rooted in something and has to almost be like, of course he did that. But to do the of course when you haven't done it in a while, it's kind of, it's challenging to be simple, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, is it important that when people look at all your work that it has it's sort of consistent,
or relational?
Yeah, it's convenient, like if the light catches it, you could see it from across the room.
But I'm
which I
saying
think
the
is
repetition of it is that's kind of like a pop art thing, They just have everything sort of be part of the series, or just like
I like it too.
Take all the individual pieces and put them together, and they all
it's nice.
Uniformity there.
A big part of what we do by selling stuff is it's like all image based, like so. Like you take a picture, like my stuff's not going to look on your shelf the way it does in the picture because of all the stuff, but I feel like the packaging here kind of can build a box around it that feels like a photograph, which has a feeling to it. So I feel like, hey, if you could do that with a package, well, quietly too,
Well, your stuff has a charisma to it, and charisma I mean by it. The fact that there's rounded edges or sharp edges, that's black versus white, that all of that gives a charisma to it. If a package is very sharp and spiky and sharp edges, crisp edges, diagonals, pointed things, and so forth, that gives a charisma to it. Versus a pink unicorn, which has very fluffy round edges and maybe a soft packaging and stuff like that, because that's the charisma of the piece. Matches the charisma of the packaging, and so your charisma is that kind of mysterious black hole, kind of with its piece hovering in it.
Yeah, and the thing is, the fact that the new material we're using is so soft and gentle, it almost feels like infant skin. I feel like it's nice because you see it and you're just it's a very, you look at like, oh, there's fangs and it looks like metal things I could prick my finger on, and it's black. When you touch it, it's kind of like soothing and kind of like.
Almost like plush.
Yeah, it feels it's nice. It's not as scary.
Well, your charisma is much more active and much more of that. It has a lot of I always see it like a street band playing, on the drums and so forth. It's like a 4 or 5 piece combo. So it's this and this, and it kind of.
Hold on. How so my toys are like a street band.
Yeah, that it has that kind of loud charisma to it, that it's
like New Orleans ragtime.
What is his, like some sort of, what is his?
Chamber music, maybe?
What sort of music would you compare his shit to? Chamber music? Or
no,
weird electronic?
The
ambient
real
music.
subtle Nine Inch Nails stuff.
Ambient stuff.
Yeah.
Right. Well, my shit is like some guy beating on a fucking a plastic bucket in the subway.
Along with maybe a guitar or something like that.
And that guy that plays that weird flute piano thing. Do you ever see that guy?
Well, let's throw a fucking asshole on a didgeridoo.
Accordion
in there too.
No accordion.
I gotta draw the line.
A banjo.
Well, what the fuck? Because this place is weird. You know, everybody, this is the thing about this episode, you're going to be treated to a lot of fucking B-roll, so watch the screen, because don't listen, watch, because we're going to be boring, but the visuals are great. You've got all kinds of really random-ass fucking ancient technology in there, and it almost all seems to work. You've got, what's the oldest machine you have in there?
Probably the letter, like either the Heidelberg or the Kluge presses, which are basically a design from early last century, the 20s or 30s.
Mm-hmm.
The Heidelberg was used originally for ink impression printing. It's called a platen press because it's basically two large flat plates that come together and come apart, together and apart.
That's what you used to make the die cuts too, right?
Well, they were later adapted to do die cutting. It was something that these machines could do, but they were primarily for inking. And the Heidelberg I have is called a 10 by 15, so it was 2 book pages. So you would actually hand set all the type for the 2 book pages, print the 2 pages, then turn the whole stack of
They were doing that shit in the early 20th century?
Yes. And
hand letter setting and everything.
Yeah, 1910 and stuff. Well, later on came linotype, which is where you could almost, like a pseudo typewriter, type a line, then would cast in lead, so you'd have this entire line. Newspapers were done that way. And so this machine with the 2 layers that come together, go apart, it's called a platen because that's what this large plate is called. And it would spread ink, a piece of paper would be brought in, and then the impression made. And it could do die cutting, but that was rarely done with those machines. But as computerized offset printing arrived, these machines were fantastic machines, but sitting idle most of the time, and then die cutting emerged as the principal use of these machines. And most of the time I use it here for die cutting.
Yeah.
And so we were talking about your box. We actually, over the last week, designed that. Can we talk about the process of that?
More than a week. It's 2-3 weeks.
2 weeks? Okay.
Yeah.
Smoke some weed.
Can we finish this conversation, then you can cut it?
What conversation?
Oh, we're just chatting about...
Yeah.
He's going to talk about your box, and I'm going to smoke weed while you guys
Go. So what happens with this box was you and I were just rattling ideas back and forth because you had been using that old kind of prototype box.
Prototype box, yeah.
I had the die lying around for that one. It actually, I had created that under the request of Killer Bootlegs.
Exactly.
And he had requested that, so I fabricated the die and I produced a short run for him on that. And then the die had been sitting here, I think, for about a year and a half, 2 years.
It was based off the old mail-away box.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was the Kenner one. Now, did you have one, when you originally designed or did the die, was it based on one that you had, or did you just kind of rough estimate where it was?
Actually, Killer gave me dimensions of it.
Okay.
He gave me a pencil sketch of it.
Okay.
And then I actually made a brand new design based on his sketches and dimensioning.
Are there images of the original ones that you can find?
He had sent me a photograph of it, and I don't know whether it was a mock-up he had done or whether it was one that was actually commercially. I don't know the answer to that, but he did send me photographs of it, and I understood the concept of how it had to fit, and so I just made an original using Illustrator. Created a vector line, what's called a die line, which is an outline where all the cuts are going to occur, and then another set of lines, which are where all the creases or scores are going to go. And so that you had been using, and now we said, okay, what's the next version of that going to be?
Yeah, and the whole impetus was, it works for most any 3 3/4 figure, but the Phasma is taller because she's taller, and I have an upcoming Phasma project that I wanted to have her head in it, so I said, we need to make it a little bit bigger, and then we just started saying, what would be the best size to get so I could function with a lot of different size figures, and there's like different levels that you can set the floor at, and it was.
So we were talking about doing variations of that original design, and then out of our discussion came the idea, why don't we make it a 2-piece box, which would slide one inner part into the outer part and sort of drop the outer flange part of that box. And so then we started kicking ideas back and forth. So I drafted up a couple of ideas of this is how this box would work, sent them to you.
back and forth. Hey, what
Right.
about this? Hey, what about that? What about this?
Yeah,
what
you had
about
some
that?
fantastic
Yeah,
ideas
yeah.
with certain specialty windows
Yeah,
for
yeah.
letting light in.
Yeah.
Also suggestions about how the flaps work. and
Yeah,
so
yeah.
forth.
I think it's important to have two people that kind of understand what you need to do, coming from different perspectives and picking up different things and suggesting different things. So yeah, totally
Okay.
collaboration.
So then, once we had the idea down, then it came to me. I actually did a formal design of it, printed it out on cardstock, and then cut it out, taped it, glued it. And then I sent you the PDFs also.
And I printed it out, went to the copy shop, printed it out, built the prototype. Yeah.
And so then we had another meeting of the minds where we were talking, and you reminded me we need to cut this out in order for this to not overlap and stuff. So at that point, once I had that finished design, then I actually executed it in the real material we were going to utilize, because the friction fit of the box is critical. You didn't want it to fall apart, but at the same time not to, you had to cram the two halves together. And so then I found I was down to the point of shaving it down to like 5 or 6 thousandths of an inch to get the right friction feed.
Literally thousands.
And it is
Yes.
How do you measure a thousandth of an inch?
I've got micrometers, and also using Illustrator is a fantastic program because you're able to specify down to 1,000th of an inch the spacing between the score lines or between the cut lines.
And it fits. First one I put together, both pieces, absolutely
So you're
perfect.
gonna rant and rave about this box, and we don't even get to look at it.
No, because the way I want to show it and stuff, like, you know that there's things about it that you've just heard, but I think if anybody's anticipating what it may seem like, then you'll enjoy it once I show you the picture, but I'm not going to show it right now.
So let me just get this straight, because you guys have been just droning on. It's like you guys basically just came up with some nifty little box with a
Right.
bunch of clever little, well planned out
Features
little
on it.
holes and vents.
Yeah,
and
it's
little
very utilitarian,
aspects that you
yeah.
can use this box for multiple projects and switch out different elements to make them look different over time. Like the inner box color can change, the stamp can change, the height and stuff, the inner
Yeah.
platform that the figures. Oh well, fucking good for you. So what?
Well, my thing is, Tom
Now
is
what?
beyond helpful, and
No, it's not about me, but
no, but my thing is like when Tom and I do stuff together, a lot of the projects we do are like, okay, this will work for this, but then the next time we have to do this, and it's just more fun when we can do something
Well,
that
I mean, what
really
I always find is always fun is when you're trying to always marry your unbridled creativity with the utility of the things you're actually trying to make. Like
yeah.
that's what I always thought was so cool, even as a kid, of the original He-Man figures. Is like, you know, they had like 2 or 3 different arm styles and 2 or 3 different leg styles, one torso, one, you know, pelvis piece, and then just shuffled them around with different heads and just sort of reapplied these 3 molds over and over again in all these conversations. It's like you have to make those kind of considerations even when you're making art of this nature.
Well, this is what
and
you and I had talked about, which is the establishment of a platform which is efficient, because then you can do the tooling. Like I was going to say, the next step is once we had satisfied the design, then I went out to Milwaukee Steel Rule Dies and had them fabricate an actual, it's like a cookie cutter, to actually precision cut. And so putting it on the Heidelberg press, I'm able to stamp out 500 of the lids or 500 of the bases in 20 minutes because it has industrial tooling which allows repetitive. However, it costs like somewhere around $300 for that die set. So if you want only 10 boxes, it's not efficient for that. So when you're talking about these figures, and they kept using the same mold over and over for the leg,
but changing it up every time.
In
different color, different paint job. And like combining, here's these 2 legs with the other arms, you know, whereas on the other figure,
Mix and match.
Yeah, mix
I think
and match.
Mattel cleaned up, because if you look at like G.I. Joe versus, you know, G.I. Joe, everything was sculpted, and I think, you know,
Each
figures are
figure
figures. Mattel could easily have sculpted every figure new and still made a killing, but they really must have done well on their tooling because of that nature. They didn't need to
But
be.
I mean,
It was
the
a
thing
popular
is, to
toy
me
line.
Also, personally, you know, I liked it, and even when I, you know, even a kid, I knew that's why they.
There's
had
a
it.
uniformity to it.
Something about the repetition with variation that just makes it very appealing. I mean, that's why I think Masters of the Universe is so successful as like pop art, because like the repetition is such an essential part of collecting, or, you know.
Why did
just any
Secret
sort of
Wars
thing
never
pop.
take off? They were on track.
What do you mean?
Just how Secret Wars are basically like the same figures.
Those did well, didn't
Yeah,
they?
no, but in terms of like never really. Whereas He-Man comes out of nowhere, makes up all new characters. You have a line that's Marvel that's characters that have been
Use
around
the
for
same
decades,
approach.
and they're like and it didn't really go
I
that
can't
far.
answer that question.
Yeah. There's no
But-
answer, I guess.
But the whole balance between unique items and then production requirements of tooling and gearing
Costs
up and the
and all
cost
that shit.
makes you have to find the balance between the two. So
Yeah, but that's what's fun. It's like
Exactly.
as the creative person looking at like, okay, how can I take the built-in limitations or sort of parameters of this particular thing I'm doing? How can I get as much out of it as possible? Like, how many different ideas can I come up on this same thing? And not only just because I have to make it worthwhile, because it's actually fun to do that, and just fun seeing like I take so much delight in this package that how many ways can I?
That's
keep
what I've been
using
doing
it?
as I've been stamping
And then you
stuff
have a piece
out.
that works
Like
as
I'm
well.
like I'm bored stamping silver. I want to stamp prism. So in my mind, as I'm stamping them, I'm like, now I have to think of something that's going to look good in this
Figure
prism
that-
thing.
figure
you know?
Yeah, right.
relates.
Which just seems like a counterintuitive thing to
We
do. if
need
you're
it.
making
Structure. It's
artwork.
like having art class and getting a project. Like make something that goes in here. That's what you want. I mean, just the freeform is fine, but
But
someone
it's
gives you
funny,
rules,
though.
it's almost easier.
But I mean, I guess if you're also thinking, you're still straddling the line between art and like product design and everything, and it's just like, usually it's like, here's a product, let me design a package. Whereas in certain cases here, it's like, I have this cool package, now I need to figure out a product to put inside of it. I mean, that's ridiculous. But
it's an interesting, again, the balance is between a artist, with a capital A, that makes one painting versus a designer who is making something that is suitable for mass printing. And suddenly your choices of colors might be different because you can use a glow-in-the-dark paint, but there's no offset printing press that naturally runs glow-in-the-dark ink. That's a special run.
that's when we call you.
And so when you're making every piece unique, as sculpted unique or painted unique, then that's fantastic. And you don't have to care about simplifying it for mass production. Or you can have undercuts.
Yeah.
But then if you're going to vacuum form it, you need to not have undercuts.
It's like once I started casting resin, my stuff got a lot less sculpturally interesting.
Hollows and things
Yeah, it was just
inside.
like make it smooth, make it a bubble, and I learned to like that and work within that. But my really early stuff, it's just like jagged and angular, and it's like exciting, and it goes in and out, in and out. In and out is good for sculpture, but it's not really good for all casting.
Production,
Yeah,
casting.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's fun. I mean, that's what's fun
It's a
about
rule,
it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
and it just forces you to get to the point. Keep shit simple.
Yeah,
Just,
yeah.
like,
And to
focus
be
on
honest,
what's essential.
like my package being black and however it feels is really just trying to like make it almost easier, because it's like I'd love to make a title for every figure that goes there, but I just know the logistics behind that don't really match up with what I want to be doing with my time. So let's just put the logo there every
It
single
would be
time.
weird if all of a sudden, like, you had the name of the character on your.
Yeah. I mean, because my thing is like I feel like you should know the name, even though I don't even want to give them names. They're all about how they feel,
But do you feel that limits the person's appreciation if it has a specific name? Does that cut down their ability inside their own head to have their own story about the figure?
Well,
have
if-
you
if-
restricted their...
By giving it a name?
Yes.
Yeah, in a weird way, and I think that's why some of my names are just really are just really basic kind of archetypical names that are just have no emotion, and you don't know where the guy's from or why he's mad at someone or anything like that. And it's different ways of telling stories, but I feel like I could tell the story without writing it in a weird. Hopefully.
I had a great
Here's a
experience.
story.
Oh yeah, every figure is made for a specific reason and is filled with like metaphors and symbolism and mathematical reasons why these two are painted this way and that one.
Can somebody figure that out without picking your head apart?
Maybe if someone kind of knows me, or if there's people of my same mindset, which
Just by looking at the figure and not knowing you or anything. How much of that?
It
could be
depends. It
extracted from?
depends. Like I painted
Not
things.
from a single figure.
I painted like certain buttons on this one character copper, and in my mind those are small pennies. But like I might not ever release that figure as an addition, but it's just like maybe someone would see him and say those look like pennies.
Well, that's what when people see small little copper circles, they tend to think of pennies.
No one's ever said it to me that's seen it, so I don't know.
Why does it need to be pennies? Why are they pennies?
Because in
On
my
this
mind,
figure?
to stay on that figure and to make sense of who that character was and what kind of person he was and why he would put pennies on that. There's
Yeah,
all that
what's
stuff.
the reason?
Not yet.
You're an asshole.
So
Yeah.
I just a little side story.
Yeah.
I worked with an art gallery many years ago in Vermont that did high art. $20,000 paintings.
Mhm.
One painting, $20,000. And they would arrive in these wooden crates, and they would arrive from the artist had just completed these dozen paintings. And I was there with the manager of the gallery, and they were unboxing these. And each time they lifted one out, they looked, morning on a rocky day. Boom.
Yeah.
In other words, they were making names up on the spot. This one, Phantasmagorical Evening. Boom. They're beautiful
I've done
paintings.
that.
Yeah, and just
My thing
very
is like
arbitrary names.
any text, any number, any symbol that can describe language or amount, that's all title. Like when you see, Coven Witch, $30, that's the title, or that's the identification of that object for me. It's not really a
It's
title.
not really the name. It's a
No,
description.
that's why the SWWF is great to just go to the original mold numbers, and because those are specific to Star Wars, but they're not titles and they're just numbers. And if it gives you a little bit of a pause, but I just wanted something written there that separated them each, that told numerically why they came out. And if you figured it out, good for you. But if not, it just makes the package look great, and it's not a name that's going to suggest anything that I haven't already in the creation of the character and the package.
So you're going out of your way to avoid any sort of suggestion whatsoever.
Yeah, because
Of how to
I'm
interpret the figure.
Because I'm a loudmouth in general, and I'd love to be quiet, but I can't. This allows me to be quiet.
Interesting.
Yeah. I talk a lot, but I just don't talk with that
I mean, I
stuff.
talk a lot too, and my toys are loud too.
Yeah,
so maybe
totally.
you're better than me.
No, you don't want to be quiet, do you? With
No.
your work?
No,
No, so then it's fine.
no.
It's
I mean,
my thing. Everyone's just like, you're not that cool. You're not that quiet. I'm like, yeah, so
You're
what?
not as cool as your toys.
Yeah.
Because the thing is funny, my toys totally match my personality.
Mhm.
I think there's probably no difference whatsoever.
Yeah, you think mine don't? You're scared that they might. Yeah, you just haven't met that
I
person
really
yet.
have to think about that because I've known you and your toys about the same time, although I've known them separately. And
I like dark shit. I like scary shit.
Well, this goes back to the question: are you making art for yourself, or are you making art to communicate?
I'm making it to communicate because I think
So, what is it? The overall message.
it's just, it is what you get. I think.
Okay.
Hopefully the message is unspoken. Every day I walk home a certain part of the street between my house and studio, I have a glimpse of what it is that I do. And it's only there that I can actually think, okay, if someone asks, what does he do? It's that. And it's just putting a spin on something.
what do you do?
I just put a spin on something.
That's your job, putting a spin on something.
Or just
a specific something.
it's like my version of something. And its figures help because they're characters and it's stuff like
It's
that.
not your version of figures.
Maybe it is. I don't know. Yeah.
Is what you're doing about figures?
No, it's about attitudes and ideas and kinds of characters and stuff like that, or
Personalities?
yeah, maybe personalities. Like you look at the stuff and you're like, I know what kind of guy that guy is.
And are they all assholes or bad people? Because you're kind of an angry dick, No, I listen, man. Let me.
No, fine. I come off
You're
that way.
Somewhat of, I don't know what your inner soul is, but you're kind of a bit of a misanthropic, angry guy on some levels, right?
Yeah.
You
I
don't love
definitely.
people.
I
You don't love being around people that much.
No, I definitely do. It's just I have friends, and those are my friends.
Right.
Anybody that I meet through this, with the exception of you guys, I just sense it's like hanging out with people from work.
So then, who are the these figures that you're making? Who are they, or where are you drawing them from?
For me, they're just
Are they based or?
There's some, I want people to feel I definitely want people to feel like there's a bit of cleverness to what I've done, because it is a simple process. So you have to be smart with it. I feel. Or I try to.
The thing.
I just switch the head on most of my.
The thing
figures,
is, I
that's
think
it,
the most sort of you series is the Star Wars G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
The Star Wars figure with the G.I. Joe head on it.
Yeah.
And it's just that's just sort of that's a very specific set of letters in an alphabet, so
Yeah.
to speak. You've got X amount of G.I. Joe figures, you've got X amount of Star Wars.
Star Wars is the low end. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you can only make so many of these combinations or pick so many of these things, and you're only going to use each one of them once.
That's it. Yeah.
So what are the combinations you're gonna make and why, and like, is the character formed when you said, oh, like, well, the Cobra Commander head looks good on Boba Fett, so here's a character, or is it more like, I have a character, I'm envisioning what parts can I use to bring him to life?
To be honest, I can go back. I made most of them in 2005, and they were at Zaka in 2006, like the initial 40 pieces of the original thing. So these things have been around forever, so it's, you know. But the Cobra Commander thing, I mean, you want to know a little story, or what's in my mind when I'm making that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, this is it.
Okay.
I'm using the Boba Fett body. You exist. I know who you are. You're making figures. It's all about the helmet. You know, I think to put a rag over a head where there should be a helmet that's made someone else famous is...
Really?
Yeah, that came into play. Everything, whatever's on the news, I can bring it into why I'm painting this red and that green, or why I'm doing that. There's a story behind everything.
Okay.
So
wait a
in
minute.
that case, you're involved, because
I
it was
just
like...
want to say, going back, like,
Yeah.
when you were sitting down, it's like, okay, I'm going to make a Star Wars G.I. Joe mashup, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm imagining you have access to a certain amount of all the pieces that you're going to want, right?
Let me tell you a story. Before I did Star Wars G.I. Joe, it was only model pieces that I would kit bash. Never science fiction, never anything that someone else had imagined, only military things that were real that I would recombine. A friend of my girlfriend's was like, oh, here's a box of G.I. Joe guys. I know you do toy stuff. And I was just like, that's nice. You don't really know me that well. It's fine. But I don't mess with toys. And there was a Luke Skywalker figure that his brother had blown the head off with a firecracker. And there was also the Torch figure in there. And I think it was Metal Gear Solid stuff was going on at the time. And I was like, oh, the Torch head on this flight suit kind of looks like Snake from the 70s, because he's got like the... And I was like, that's an interesting character. And then it was the Anakin with the Destro. And that was kind of like almost Cobra canon. Like, oh, what is he wearing in Scotland? Like when he's sleeping with the Baroness. Like, what is it, you know, like that whole thing, you know? Like, so that kind of tied into that. And that's why the colors are similar to G.I. Joe. So they're all kind of all over the place.
Yeah,
you know?
I guess the question I'm asking is, like, when you're going to your toy pile to put a figure together, do you already have something in mind or a feeling and you're looking for parts to support that, or do you let the parts sort of dictate the narrative, genesis?
I just started designing
like, oh, this looks cool with this. Who is this guy?
Yeah, just at this point, I know there's more Star Wars figures to do, and like when we were working on the box, and you sent me an image, the figure, which I like to remain, that was in for the movie. I was like, wow, that figure looks really cool. That's not a figure that I've done yet in that line. Force myself to use that figure. What's the face? And then I was like, okay, you know what? I always loved this figure. I haven't done this figure yet. Force myself to find the face for that. That's how those two have worked. It all started though just random in front of me.
Yeah, I mean that's the same with me. Sometimes I'll just put one, two together and it'll be like cool. And other times they're like, I want to use this piece. I don't know what the other piece is. Let me go
on
out
eBay,
into the world and find a part.
Well, how much of your creative process is random discovery, and how much of it is you exploring a niche or an element of the world that already exists inside your head, which is fully popular? I've encountered through discussions with you, there is an inner universe to you that you periodically manifest pieces of, and so what percentage of your time is the random discovery versus, okay, now it's time to manifest the water culture people in this universe?
I mean, it's difficult to say, because there's just sort of like an inner world going on all the time, and then there's the other aspect of it's like I gotta make stuff to sell,
right?
You know, and it's like a combination of just like I've always wanted to try Mod Podge. Like I've been making my collages, for example, and I was using the Liquitex gloss varnish. It's like, oh, I heard a lot about Mod Podge, I'm gonna try that. So I make like 10 pieces with that and just try it and experiment with the materials, and it's just like these things I'm making aren't necessarily advancing my inner universe so much, but just that I'm experimenting with this material means at some point if I master this thing, I can bring it in and I'll have a more specific application for it in one of the more grand picture things. It's like almost like there's like the major leagues where like here's my most important projects that I'm actively working on to pursue a specific agenda and goal. And then here's just my realm of experimentation, where just like as like, you know, I'm building this giant tower, and like there's all these like forges and mines and like sort of mills at the base of the tower that are just sucking in material and putting it to work, and some of it goes on the flame, it gets thrown on a pyre and heats the place, and some of the good shit goes in the fucking elevator to the top. And you know, so there's this front of just chewing up everything in front of me and just ingesting it, and then there's later digestive aspects, you know.
Well, that's what's interesting about that is, in a way, you're saying that your learning curve items, which are jerks, are being shared with the public, but you have a different kind of segment of your audience is for that work, which is, I'm learning this skill to airbrush or to Mod
pretty
Podge.
much. What the first time I ever start a new thing, whether it would be airbrushing
Technique or skill.
it's immediately for sale. It's like when I first bought the airbrush, I did the airbrush practice pieces. I put out like 10 necromancers. I cast 10 necromancers, or 20, 10 in green, 10 in pink, and then just practice airbrushing on them. Put it in a package and called it airbrush practice, and you know, and sold it. And it just, for me, that's just an economical thing. It's just like, I want to try this, and my time, I need to make money for my time, and I think maybe for some people it might have some sort of
and it's not that
value.
it's not that crazy of an ambition to do a small thing just to do it and be like, I don't need to make 30 of these. Like, people are going to enjoy these, and I can move on to the next thing, and you know, just kind of keep going. You know.
Well, but which I would contrast with you. I don't think you would ever release something that was your learning curve item.
No, I make sure my stuff is up to a certain spec,
Right.
and I don't mind doing I hate having to do more work, just like anybody, like having to do tedious corrections to things that should have been ready. But I just do it because I know everyone just is, when a lot of people get my stuff, they are just like, oh yeah, the character's cool, but where's, you know, there's no air bubbles, and it's just, it does sting a little bit, because it's just like, it doesn't matter structurally what it is. It's really about, do I have to tell you what he does for a living for you to understand who he is, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I feel you, man. I mean, it's like, I just never wanted, I knew, like, just the way I work, and just like, I knew I was never really gonna ever hit perfection. It's like,
I'm happy with the perfection.
No, you are perfect. Your shit is fucking,
no, it's not perfect. It makes me, I want it to look that way. You know, that's and you know that
you have a high level of execution
also,
that
you've mastered your execution to the point where you know you're gonna make 10 figures. They're gonna come out good. You know how to make the mold right. It's like, I make the mold. Still to this day, I don't know what I'm gonna get. You know, oh, this every one of these is gonna have a bubble here. Well, I'll work with that somehow.
Well, I do that too,
you know?
sometimes too. Like, if I know something's unavoidable, I just know, like, okay, I'm gonna have to put that time in to fix it, to get it to perfect. It's always possible to salvage anything, but sometimes you luck out and it's great and you can get 50 casts out of it and they're all perfect, and other times it's the labor of just like intense shit, but you do it, or you restart again. But sometimes you're like, if I restart, I just have to put in more work on the back end. It's not worth totally restarting.
Yeah, well, whatever.
Yeah, it's totally different.
It doesn't matter.
Swirling is relaxing for me. That's how I loosen up.
Let's pivot. You know, let's get out of this conversation.
Talk about toys?
Well, no, I just want. I mean, you know, we still got plenty of time. Just because, but we're hearing fucking sidekicks. I want to talk about sidekick shit. Where the fuck did you get all of these machines?
Well, a lot
of shit that isn't necessarily in use anymore. Where do you get it, and how do you maintain this stuff?
Well, there's several issues with that. First off, obtaining in the first place. There are surplus auctions every day somewhere in the country.
Right.
And the big liberation for me was to realize that it was worthwhile to spend. There are companies that specialize in rigging and shipping large pieces of equipment.
Right.
And if it's something with it, I monitor auctions all the time within a 300-mile radius, because that I can just go drive.
Online?
Yeah, online, and go. There's a bidspotter.com is a great source, and what part of it though is you have to know what you're looking at or what you're hunting for. There's certain jargon in certain fields, like die cutters or vacuum formers.
I'm sure most of there must be some things that you didn't even know you wanted until
Exactly.
it showed up.
And some of it's accidental discoveries, like that vacuum form machine. Other pieces I went and actually have been, and there are several pieces that I'm always looking for, but I'm looking for cheap. And generally that means a well-worn machine that is has been utilized by some 60-year-old guy who's been with the company for 40 years, knows how to run that machine. Either he finally retires, and then nobody there knows how to run that machine anymore, so they auction it off or sell it, or the company goes bankrupt and then they just liquidate everything.
Okay, so when you come upon one of these machines, like the vacuum form machine is a perfect example. I mean, aside from that, you have to figure out how to get it here.
Right.
You pick it up and you have a company that...
Rigging is a whole adventure in itself. When you're dealing with a 4,000, like the paper cutter I have there weighs 6,000 pounds. And I went down to Maryland, I bought it at an auction for $1,000. What happens if you lowball at auctions, you don't get this cutter, you don't get this cutter, you don't get this cutter, but then the 8th cutter you bid on, nobody else is interested in for some reason.
Maybe because there aren't 8 people that want one of those things.
That could be too. And so then you wait out everybody else, they get theirs, and then I win it for $1,000. It's a $5,000 cutter, I get it for $1,000.
Once you get one of these machines, some of which are very old,
they need work.
But they need work, but it's like, here's the question. Like you described this 60-year-old guy,
right?
You know, oftentimes I would imagine when you buy the machine, hopefully you can spend a little time with the last person who's mastered it, so you can sort of pick up a little bit about how it works.
Some tips. That's only happened once. It's only happened once. Like the vacuum form machine, nothing. No, in fact.
And did it come in working condition?
No.
You have to replace parts and stuff.
I had to overhaul part of it to get to it.
How do you find the parts for this?
Just well. Some of it I've actually found like certain intricate valves and things. Everything has serial identification numbers. eBay is your friend. I've found that, for instance, there's a electric actuated vacuum or air valve on that. It has a huge vacuum tank. Gradually this vacuum, it's like a reverse air compressor. Instead of compressing the air in the tank and then you liberate it, it evacuates the air in this metal tank.
How does it do that?
Just with a right, it's a
suction. How does it make the suction?
It's a little pump with a motor attached to it. It's like the reverse of an air compressor, except you hook the empty tank to the intake rather than the out. So it's the same motor.
You know, like the exhaust on a vacuum cleaner?
What creates the vacuum? Like, what's happening inside?
It's the same mechanism that an air compressor uses in
What
back.
does an air compressor use?
They often have like little veins, or they're.
How does it suck the air?
It's a rotary disc that has a configuration of different veins and so forth on it, which then gradually, it's almost like an automobile engine where you have valves and so forth, except it has rotary valves. So as this thing rotates, it then pulls air in through one intake. This is so hard without paper and pencil. I'm used to drawing diagrams and stuff.
Well, make it work.
Okay, so it's a rotary motor with a rotary pump that is gradually compressing air out this way, but in order to compress air that way, it has to suck air that way, like a vacuum cleaner, except it has a much stronger motor in it. Then this large empty tank is connected to it, so you gradually empty the tank, just like an air compressor gradually builds up air pressure.
You're not just emptying the tank, aren't you creating like negative space
exactly.
in the tank?
Right, you're taking the air out of the tank, deficit in the tank, and it has an electric valve that's clamped tight.
You're not just taking the air out of the tank, you're taking more air out than is actually in the tank.
Right, and it's got a sealed valve, so instead of inflating a balloon, you're deflating it, but it's rigid, so you just end up with a vacuum in there. And this electric valve, when the control mechanism says, now I need suction, it triggers this valve and goes open suddenly, and you all at once. So you use the pump to gradually build up vacuum.
Build up the tension.
Right.
And then let it rip.
And so I just found
like outer space if the airlock blows and everything shoots out, right?
Right. So what I did was I found that was not working properly on that thing. So I found a serial number. I found one on eBay, like $10. I ordered it. But in the meantime, I said, let me look at this thing. So I pulled the pump, this little electric valve apart, and I found some piece of crud had gotten sucked through the vacuum tank and was jamming the flap inside it.
So it was never totally closed.
So this is how you spend your Saturday nights.
Right.
Like,
right.
Covered in
no girlfriend, and I just nerd over old equipment. It's basically, it's a matter of you gradually take it apart. I've made mistakes where I've pulled things apart that were actually functioning where the problem was somewhere else, or I've broken things as a result. Yeah, you know that.
That sucks. Yeah, no, I've not. Well, I think it's great that you've created all of this shit, and I don't think there's anybody else doing this, thank God, because we have our fucking hooks in you. And we can use your shit.
Exploit
like,
me, yeah.
Well, it's not. Just,
Yeah,
it's
mutual
not,
exploitation.
You like this.
I do. Well, this goes back to what we talked about before, which is I like production, I like process, I like making these machines work, but the concept of creating this figure and the look of it, the colors of it and so forth is outside of my world. But if you came to me and said, now I want 1,000 of these figures, let's figure out how to produce
the thing
this.
is, it's a little more than that, because like you can still discern, like, oh, maybe you couldn't have come up with it, but like you can still tell that you like this one better than this one. You know, you have taste. You know, you
Yes.
have
I don't know, I'm kind of
understanding. No, you know, like I saw that fucking room, the other room in there,
Yeah.
and it's like at least 50% of that is
You get
psychedelic
B-roll
shit.
of
So
that?
maybe we should fucking.
Yeah, you are.
question
Let's
it.
talk about that. You are probably one of the larger. What would you rank Tom in terms of collectors?
Of psychedelic.
Yeah.
Top
Now?
5.
The size of my,
Well, we know who number 1 is,
right.
right?
Ooh.
He was not named, yes.
Dove is number 1.
Okay.
Dove is number 1.
Dove,
Yeah.
Dove. Oh yeah,
Don't be
yeah.
an idiot. Dove has hands down the ultimate psychedelic. Has 2
Yeah.
of everything.
You've
Does
ever
he
made.
have 2 or does he? Is Dave have one of them too?
Dove has 2 of everything.
He has 2 of everything. Okay.
Yes. Everything. Nobody else can claim that. Nobody else can come close to claiming that. There are certain people like Jerkbag, you know, that has like everything up to a point and then stops. You're sort of in the same boat as that. You have all the early shit.
I love the carded figures.
You have the class. Well, I'm still making carded figures.
I know.
But you know, you have all the early shit, and then it kind of stops. There's a couple of other people that have gone about up to your level and a little beyond and stopped. And then there's one other person that's kept it going.
So would you
For
say
much
Tom's
longer.
top 3?
So I would
No,
say,
about number
I would
5.
say, I would put Dove at number 1. I would put there's a tie for 2. I would almost put you at
Yeah,
like
I think it might
3
be-
or
it might
4,
be-
4 or
might have-
5.
4 or 5. That's
4 or
what
5, yeah.
I
No, no
Or-
medal.
But I mean, it's also it's like, and also because you have a shitload of the old shit.
Yes.
You have a Sucklord 66, right?
Yes.
You have a Necromancer.
Yes.
You have another bitch. You didn't
Simeon
get the
got
fuck.
me the Necromancer.
Yeah, you have all the classics. So
I even have your earliest
good
piece.
for you.
The little.
Eno?
Yes, I
Eno,
have
yeah.
2
What's
Enos.
JK5 Eno.
That's the first thing I saw of you.
Hey, there's some.
That was right there.
Yeah,
Nice.
well, we're gonna be talking about that critter a lot more in the near future. What have we not covered? in
Well,
this conversation?
anyway, but you had a good question, which was, my fascination. You collect figures and you mash up figures. I love old machinery. I love old letterpress machinery and stuff. I
you
got
also
hooked
like
on it.
a good excuse to use it.
Exactly. I like having a purpose for it. It's like having a car or a cool vintage motorcycle, but nowhere to go. It's like you need a destination. So with some of this vintage equipment, you provide me a purpose and a challenge to put it to use. I mean, there are other things I've done with it, but it's not as interesting or as challenging as some of the stuff you guys have brought. And I'm always on the lookout for a piece of machinery that enables me to do some arcane die cutting or vac forming, or I bought an old Bridgeport mill.
Right.
So
But you know, it's also, I mean, I appreciate that about that too. It's like, wow, it's like you have gone to all this effort to bring about these resources and these abilities for my creativity to exercise itself. I feel like I have to take advantage of that because it's a rare thing, you know. So it's a challenge for me. It's like, you know, here are these things that I have access to that are pretty special. It's like I should take advantage of it.
I think thinking about what Tom does and what Tom's capable of doing because of what he possesses and is, you know, made here, to me that's like another toy box to move pieces around with.
right.
You know, that's how I know Tom can do vac form. I know he can do die cutting. I know he can do hot foil. So it's almost like basic things like that you can combine together.
I know, and you can come out here, you can get away from the city.
And do
you
Lego
can
all
just
night.
get away from girls and just bro out on this nerd shit all day and smoke pot and play with fucking Lego. We should talk about the Lego a little bit.
Ooh.
We've
Yeah.
been doing some pretty extensive Lego projects.
Yeah.
What are you doing with your Lego exactly?
I'm just.
Are you gonna work on it tonight?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
going to.
good.
Last
Then
night was
you
tired.
will.
I'm just making a city that I always wanted to
To
make,
live in.
I think, or live in, and every time I build a building, I'm like, this is where I want to live, and stuff like that. I think drawing when I was a kid, it was
Your
always...
city looks fucking frightening.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah. You know, it's entertaining, you know. But yeah, I always just try to draw cities, and I used to stack papers together and draw squares to see how big my buildings could be. I was always obsessed with that, you know. So here I can really do it because I've made the scale understandable. So when you see the things, you're like, oh my god, that building's so tall, but it's really only like this big.
Yeah, I know, but because you really got in
Yeah.
the scale.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and eventually I'd like to photograph it and bring people and make them feel like they've seen from the street level and stuff like that.
Well, you kind of mentioned something that, for you, it's almost like a sketchbook. It's, you know, some people, when they're trying to work out an idea in their head, they'll bring out pencil and paper, and pencil and paper is just a matter of being able to then start to articulate your idea in a manner that works for you, that you can then save it, store it, or refer to it, or somebody else might do it in watercolor or do a sculpt or something. For you,
Yeah.
Lego is kind of like a sketching.
Well, kind of, yeah. I mean, I am trying to write a story. I'm trying to write. I'm writing a novel. I mean, my ultimate goal is to create. I've said this before. My ultimate goal is to create a television show like on the level of Game of Thrones, like a fully
Right.
well executed, big budget,
Full world.
science fiction, full world, and I'm not at the level where I'm able to do that right now. So what I can do is write it out, write the story, and in doing so, I've never tried to do that before. So in doing so, I need to have some sort of visualization of it. And it's like, I think, like if you look at like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or anything like that, those books always start with a map.
Yep.
There's a map at the beginning of the book that shows where the places are and what's happening. And I figured if I can make the world and then put the characters in it and see them and move them around,
You've given yourself a
pull the
nice
story.
structure, I think, which is nice. Like to be able to have something that, yeah, you're pursuing a whole thing, but in the process of pursuing that thing, you have these amazing things that are coming out. Even if it's just a group of 5 figures or a building, the fact that you're making that as part of the whole, as a whole, it's incredible. But even individually, they're great too. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have a structure that you can
Well,
work within. You know.
Thanks, I guess. I mean, it's just the Lego's great just because it's like,
It's like a sketchbook.
yeah, it's like a sketchbook, and like you kind of know what you want to see going into it, but then the pieces inform it to a certain extent as well. Like I'll be digging, looking for something, being like, I need a wing for this boat, but then I'll encounter this engine gives me an idea for something else.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
put it aside, and then there's a whole. Then if you're thinking narratively, you know, it's just like who gets this and why does he have it and why is this piece important, and then and then the story just writes itself.
Yeah, I
Well,
think
it's kind of like the military table gaming. You know, you always saw it like in James Bond movie. They had one character that had all that
Yeah, they always
army
have to
set
have
up with
the
the
whole
terrain
thing.
and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Is it kind of some of that happening?
Yeah, I think so.
And you can kind of see, okay, so you imagine there's an army that comes over the hill, but then if you actually manifest and 100 little figures and then look at it, does that stimulate your?
For me, it does.
Yes.
For me, it does.
Yeah, I think
for
there's some story in mind too. More of a Sim City kind of story, but there is like, hey, this is where the power supply is, and so because of that, we have to build a park around it, so it's not as much of an eyesore as it could be. And like just from playing those games like Caesar and Sim City, I'm kind of employing that. So there's a little bit of a functional story too, but not character driven, more structure and environment.
I'm literally trying to write a story.
Yeah,
with
yeah.
characters. I mean, that's last time I was here. I put all these buildings together,
Right.
and then I went home and I wrote a bunch of shit. I wrote like 8 chapters, came up with a bunch of characters, and it's like, okay, but like I really don't know these people or who they are. So then I wanted to attack the figures and make little physical representations of the figures, so I can put them in the buildings and then figure out what they're about. And it just like,
Well,
I don't know, it's fun.
Is it also part of it that, okay, so you take Legos and you assemble the figure, and now the process causes you to focus on that figure for the duration of the time it takes you to assemble it, and then you're able to study it, is that kind of like, I wouldn't call it a meditation, but a focus on a single character rather than the sprawling world? Does that liberate a sense of deepening understanding of that character?
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. I mean, just the fact that it exists, that there's an actual representation of it. Now I can put him in his little boat, or put him in his little environment, and then like, okay, here he is, and he's in this empty room.
And he's precious to you because
Because I
That's
created
the
him,
time.
and now I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm his god.
That's
in a way.
the whole
I
thing.
made it
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's not why I'm doing it, but it's like I have complete control
Subconsciously,
over this
maybe.
guy's destiny, and I'm going to project something of myself into him, you know. And here he is in his space now. What's in his space, you know? Well, he would have a computer, and he would have a
If you
couch
look to
and
his
bed.
left, he's going to see that.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
look
Just
to
like,
his
what
right,
does he need? Not only so much that, but just like, what does he need in his life? Like, here he is. He lives in this building, and these are his friends, and this is one of his goals. And what would this guy do to achieve his goals? And also, the thing that's interesting also about building the world is like, if I'm trying to write a story. And that's one thing if you're writing a story in like the world we live in now, because like you take for granted the infrastructure of everything. But if you're creating a secondary universe that takes place in some apocalyptic scenario or
where
some
everybody
otherworldly
has three
place,
arms.
or just more like say it's in New York City in the future and the infrastructure of the United States is completely collapsed, but these people still live here. Well, where do they get their water from? Or why are the light bulbs still on? Where does the electricity come from? Who's the government? What's happening 10 blocks away? You know, or just like, here's the power structure here, but what about here? Or how's the rest of the world deal with these problems? Or what happens if they go here? And it's like, then you have to start answering all those questions, and that's why having a representation of it helps. You know, it's like, oh, there's no, Con Edison is done. So each building has electricity and water in it somehow in the story. So how does that work? Oh, well, they built a water tower.
Local generation.
Yeah, local
or,
generator, or they figured out how to tap into the lightning, or they had, you know, some other answer. But it doesn't matter what the answer is specifically, as long as it's plausible. But you have to answer those questions, and sometimes when you actually put the pieces on the board to make them interact, that brings those questions up more than if you're just sitting there typing out a story, you know.
Well, part of what has always, to me as a reader, in reading one of these worlds like Doc Smith or Tolkien or somebody like that, is that I can tell that they have thought a lot about this, and now I'm being able to read quickly through this world that, for this chapter I'm reading, he may have taken 2 months to write a chapter that I'm consuming in 30 minutes.
Or it may have taken him decades to plot out the world that this particular episode is taking place in.
Right, so it's like a distillation. It's like, well, the essence of that 2 months of thinking has cooked into something that is this small chapter.
That you read in an hour.
Right.
Wow. Well, anyway, that's what I'm doing up here. I'm just going
World building.
No, well, whatever. Yeah, world building. I'm doing my shit. We're doing our shit. This is some of the best stuff that we do. David, do you have anything else you want to add to the conversation?
I've never held one of these in my hand.
They're heavy.
Yeah, I didn't realize how solid and
Inhumanoids.
finally. Yeah,
That's an inhumanoid.
Yeah, I have the monsters like from them, the swamp guy, Tendril, but these guys I never appeal to me. But they're kind of heavy, and I kind of
That's why
understand
I
them
like
a little
them.
bit better. Yeah,
I like
yeah.
them because
Let me
they're
see
so.
that.
They're really rubber figures that have one injection molded, you know, like, or a hollow like ABS body.
I guess he gets some big helmet because he looks fucking stupid with this little
Yeah,
hat.
it's believable.
I'm down with it.
Now, is that post Aliens or pre Aliens? Like, is that Power Loader kind of inspired?
I don't know, but we're not having this conversation.
Just a
Is
little
anything
something.
else you want
Right
to
in.
add, big picture wise? Because the show's
I-
pretty much over.
Okay, I'm love having you guys come up here and visit, because I'm able to get away from my regular life, just do fun stuff, i.e. Packaging solutions, Lego building and stuff, and it is quiet up here in Vermont.
Yeah.
And to be able to have people come up and visit, fantastic.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. We listen to music, we eat, make a lot of jokes.
Smoke a lot
Tom
of
makes
weed.
insane cappuccinos every morning.
All right. Well,
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff too
and
that.
tomorrow we're gonna go thrifting.
Tag sailing with me. I
Tag
got
sailing.
two two people riding shotgun.
Nice.
Tag
And
sailing.
less room for items.
That is one thing that's cool about being up here is like you can actually buy fucking used toys in bulk cheap because every fucking little thrift store in New York is gone.
Yeah.
And they're fucking thick.
I bought a nice Iron Grenadier
They're over harvested.
today.
Yeah. There's lots of good shit. Anyway, we'll pick this up again another time, everybody. I want to thank you for watching the Suckhour Travel Edition.
My favorite.
Too bad. I love that he punches himself in the face.
Exactly.
It's just like that's so
It's really too bad.
Sidekick Larz, David Healey. My name is Sucklord. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.
Next week we'll be back with a standard episode, The Return of Nasty Neil. Peace out. We're about to get drunk and stoned and play with some fucking Lego. So see you later, everybody. Good night. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.